We are welcoming today Brian Kilmeade. Of course, you know Brian from, he was the co-host of Fox and Friends. He's also frequently on Gutfeld and other aspects of the Fox Nation. He's host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Brian Kilmeade Show, on Fox News Talk. And of course, he's the author of multiple New York Times best-selling book, including The President and the Freedom Fighter. And today that is being followed by Teddy and Booker T. So we are going to look at how Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln shaped race in America, and how Teddy Roosevelt and Booker T took that ball further down the field to where we need to have it, ought to have it. And that he's making the case that we shouldn't be running from history. We should be looking at it, understanding it. It's okay to disdain it. It's okay to have feelings about it, but to examine it. And as you know, and I've said almost every day the last couple of months, I've been obsessing about the French history and the French Revolution, how that is impacting on this present moment. So we will get into it with Brian Kilmeade after the break.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's make a resolution that's easy to keep and delivers immediately on its promise. With Genucel Skincare, you can turn back the clock and look 5, 10, even 15 years younger. And right now, Genucel Skincare is celebrating 2024 with its New Year's sales event. Save over 60% off all of our favorite Genucel products with one of our customized skincare routine packages. Say goodbye to those fine lines in the forehead and around your corner of your eyes, sagging jawline, dark marks, skin redness, even under eye bags. Leave them in 2023. Genucel works for women and men. It's safe for all skin types and perfect for skin of any age. Plus, with its immediate effects, Genucel promises results that will make you smile. Guaranteed, or 100% of your money back. Start your new year look off right with one of our custom Genucel skincare bundles right now at Genucel.com/Drew. Use our special code Drew at checkout for extra savings off your order today. And remember, every order placed is automatically upgraded to free shipping. Don't wait. That is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. Well, most of my career I've been urging people to kick habits, change habits. Well, this time I'd like to suggest getting into the habit of adding Paleo Valley grass-fed bone broth protein to your daily nutrition regimen. Here's CEO Autumn Smith.
It's made from cows with 100% grass-fed and finished, and bones. They're bones rather than the hide. Most bone broth or collagen powders are made from hides or hooves, but ours is actually made from the bone because it'll contain additional nutrients. Bone broth is a way to bring back those nutrients, those minerals, and there's glucosaminoGlycans, and then there's collagen, which helps us prevent wrinkles and joint pain and actually heals our gut. There's gelatin, and there's just all of these ingredients that the modern diet has kind of left by the wayside.
Susan and I have been mixing the chocolate-flavored bone broth literally into our coffee every morning for months, and we've noticed a difference in our energy, appearance of our hair, skin, nails. Susan's particularly very happy with this. The bioavailable protein also helps us feel satiated. That's the part I'm happy with. Paleo Valley bone broth also comes in vanilla and pure unflavored and can easily be added to your coffee, smoothies, yogurt. Go to drdrew.com/paleo, P-A-L-E-O, for 15% off your first order. Again, that is drdrew.com/paleo. And a reminder, coming up, we have Dr. Sean Baker. We're doing a little carnivore diet conversation tomorrow, and then we'll take calls. So if you want to do calls, we're going to have a lot of calls hopefully tomorrow. Next Tuesday, James Corbett on the Gelman amnesia, which is something I talk about often. Brian and I may talk about that yet today. Again, it's sort of the understanding that when they do an article in the press about you or something you know a lot about, you see how far from the facts they are, how far from the truth, but then you assume the rest of the paper is completely accurate. Wrong. Roseanne Barr coming in on Wednesday, Dr. Paul Alexander. We've got Peter McCullough coming. We got just great guests coming. and today is no exception. Please welcome Brian Kilmeade, the co-host of Fox and Friends and the host of the new book regarding Booker T and Teddy. Teddy and Booker T, how two American icons blazed a path for racial equality. Hey, Brian.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Drew. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Good to see you. So just give us the frame on the book and what led you to write it. I will tell you two things from my perspective. It's a natural follow-on to your book about Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, it seems to me. And last time I did your radio show, you assigned me the reading of Booker T's book. I forget what it's called.
Up from Slavery.
It's like a diary, Up from Slavery, and it was phenomenal. It was, it was a firsthand account. It was incredible. So thank you for that. And so it's no sort of, seems like no accident to me that Booker T inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, I mean, what he is probably one of the most impressive Americans to ever live. And when you start the book saying, essentially, I'm born a slave, never had shoes, necessarily pants, slept on the floor, never knew my father on my birthday. My mom was working 18 hours a day. She was only there to make dinner. A lot of times we'd have one meal and she'd have to go basically steal it from the rest of the farm. And then she remembers being called to the main house on the plantation and seeing a Union soldier read something that he now assumes was the Emancipation Proclamation, and you're free. And that kid, 9 years old, ends up being one of the most influential Americans, one of our most challenging times. You have my attention. And then when you research it and you see Teddy Roosevelt kind of all over it, served on the Tuskegee board. He was a key advisor to the President of the United States. He was gave a commencement address, the controversial dinner at his house. I thought, let me tell these two stories. Most people say, I know the name Booker T, I don't know what he did. And everybody knows Roosevelt, I think outside Lincoln, the most written about president. And that just was like a privilege to research their lives and how it coincided.
So I know a bit about both of them. The Booker T, mostly through what you exposed me to. And he built a school from nothing. It was incredible the way he did that. I mean, his relentlessness, he kind of reminds me of Elon Musk with that kind of relentless building and doesn't take no for an answer. And obviously a very bright man. I wondered as I was reading it, is if his heritage came under any criticism for being too enthusiastic about adopting sort of the Eurocentric white culture of the time. Did people attack him for that ever, do you know?
Wow, you cut right to it. And that's why, because I met with Ben Jealous, who was one of the leaders of the NAACP. And I wanted to find out what exactly in the Black community, I wanted to find out why exactly he doesn't resonate, why Malcolm X always did, currently now, and why a lot of people don't embrace MLK. They want conflict. And they thought he was too accommodating. I thought he was very realistic. He decided in the Jim Crow South, when they were hanging people for interracial relationships, when they were making up crimes for the most successful Black people, for they were threatening them not to go to the polls, in the middle of the Jim Crow South, when the reforms of the Civil War were melting away, he said, I'm going back when I could have stayed in the North or went to Europe, and I'm going to start a school right in the middle, and I'm going to show white people who I don't hate, even if they hate me, I will not allow them to dominate me by letting me hate them. He talks about things that have nothing to do with race, but has things to do with success in life. And all the time, I have to go back and look up some of these figures to see what color they were that meant so much to him. Most of them were white. And he goes back there and says, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to show them through education, there is no difference between blacks and whites. And he would say for generations, they learned there was. And they'd see African-Americans working in the fields, not without an education, saying, of course, we're superior. And then there's Booker T. Washington. Then there's Frederick Douglass. And then there's people who get an education. And you see them excel. And you see them flourish. And white farmers and businessmen and women going, wait a second. Maybe my parents and grandparents were absolutely wrong. So 1,000 at a time, maybe 1,200, 1,300 at a time, you would graduate African-Americans, first generation, who learned to read and write, but had to learn a skill. This is why I got Mike Rowe in the back of the book. They had to learn an occupation. He said, because white America wasn't ready to hire you yet. So you have to be indispensable. Don't hate. Show them what you can do. learn the classic, but learn a craft. Sheet metal worker. I want you to not only learn how to build a house, I want you to learn how to make bricks. I want you to be an agricultural expert. I want you to be able to work with your hands on anything. And while at my school, almost from the Karate Kid, he had the kid actually paint the house and build the fence.
Yeah.
He was learning skills. They actually
the students built the school. I remember that, and they provided the food, and they did the cooking, and they did all the stuff, and then went out and used those skills.
Women too.
Yeah, it's very.
Too.
What's that?
And women professors, women teachers. Women were invited to have a skill. And
this was I would call him a spiritual leader as much as an intellectual leader. He had a very spiritual sort of presence about him. It came through in his biography that he wrote. But I lost my train of thought about. I was going to. How does Teddy Roosevelt fit into this? And was he like Lincoln, sort of Eurocentric, a little racist, and was converted by Booker T the way Frederick Douglass sort of brought Abraham Lincoln along?
So, the thing that made this successful, I think the book successful, is because the Roosevelt family cooperated. And, I went to them right away. I was looking at Booker T. Washington. I went to Tweed Roosevelt, the great grandson. And I said, am I reaching? Am I reaching? And they said, no. He had blind spots. And that's why some idiots want to box up his statues. He was a person of his times. Mm-hmm. But because his mom was from the Confederacy. His two brothers, uncles were fighting for the South. Do you think when your mom is who you worship and your dad who's from the North, who she begged not to get into the war, and he was 6 years old that the Civil War was happening? It is not something he had to read in a book. He lived it. Don't you think his mom at some point goes, there's a difference between blacks and whites, and they were slaves on the houses that we worked on, and that's what he heard. And he would say some things where everyone deserves liberty, but we know whites are superior to blacks. But I think he evolved in his life. And part of it was reading the same book I asked you to read. Drew, he got up from slavery in advanced copy. All his friends said, you got to read this book. He was vice president. And he gave it to his wife, Edith. He says, you've got to meet this guy. And they met April 1st, 1901 in New York City. And they basically said, listen, my goal is to be president. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I want to work together with you. And he said, great. Why don't you visit me in Tuskegee? He goes, fantastic. McKinley gets shot a few weeks later, dies a few weeks after that. He becomes president, and he essentially says, how would you like to be my key advisor on judges, on postmasters? And and one of the quotes was, and I could just paraphrase it, don't tell me the gender, don't tell me the color. I just want to know the most qualified person. I mean, and sometimes it sends up shivers up your spine to think how much they wanted to change things together, how much they knew it was wrong what they were experiencing in the South. But they knew they could only do so much. It's got to be incremental. And they were very practical. I don't like what's going on, but how do I change it realistically? So if Booker T was Al Sharpton and said there was an unjust lynching down the road, there were people prevented from voting yesterday. Okay, if he took all those stands, there would be no Tuskegee. There would be no 1,200 African Americans graduating a year, flooding the region with teachers because they had to teach, free education in exchange for teaching, and then into business. So he had to pick his spots. And that bothers people that said, like W.E.B. Du Bois, who said, you're too accommodating. You're telling people, to be friends with Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan, Teddy Roosevelt, William McKinley, and Grover Cleveland, you have to accommodate. He says, that's wrong. He goes, no, it's real. But he didn't hate W.E.B. Du Bois. He would find out their point of view. He actually had a theological background for a while. He was in the seminary. And then he spun out and started making a bigger impact. And I think you must realize that too, if I could be an outsider's perspective. You must have some clients that you sit with in sessions and you see so much wrong. You almost want to throw up your hands. But you have to build incrementally and show their advances gradually, right? And if you can't get somebody, you got to move on, because the big picture is to help as many people as possible, but you got to be practical, and that's what he was.
We actually have an aphorism for that, which is progress, not perfection, and that's what you have to live by that, because if people don't, it's not a straight road to, as in the to keep the model going of recovery. It's not a straight road to full recovery. It's not like it's something that it's a straight line. It's a progressive process, and it's highly unpredictable. The forward and backwards and all the things that can happen along the way. It's part of how humans work.
Yes, and I'll give you one story that stands out because it stood out for Booker T. Washington, and he told it to Teddy Roosevelt, and they laughed. So the controversial dinner was, if people don't know, it was referenced by John McCain in 2008. He just decided to do what he did as governor. If you have a friend, he's black or white, if it's a late night, you stay over. No problem. Well, at the White House, he finds out Booker T. Washington is in Washington. He goes, come on over, let's have dinner. He said, Booker T. Washington said, that might be a problem, but the president asked me to go. It's in writing. I'm going. So he shows up and he has dinner with the family. Somebody looks at the manifest and says, who is this Booker T. Washington? Why was he eating dinner with you? He's black. It becomes a national scandal in the South. Horrible racist things are written. Got it. So they said, well, we got to bring this relationship somewhat more practical. Come over at 11 and 4. Let's not have dinner together, and let's gradually change things. Now, one day he's waiting for the train, and a man walks up to him and says, "You Booker T. Washington?" He's a white guy, and he says, "Yeah." He goes, "You're one of the finest men in America, if not the finest." And he said, "Sir, thank you so much, but it's actually, in my view, it's the President of the United States, President Roosevelt." And he looked at him and said, "I used to think so too, until he had you over for dinner." Now think about that mindset. He think there was nothing wrong. Think about, like, and especially you who want to think where that comes from. He said, "I realized at that moment I can't help that guy, but he said, I realized I have to let sleeping dogs lie. And maybe I have to wait for a generation." So he is willing to swim, but never equal.
It's really something. I mean, I have a certain amount of sort of denial about it. Like, I don't want to accept it. The other thing, I want to go back to the way Booker T has been sort of
accommodating,
not fully embraced by many black historians and black leaders and thinkers. And two other things that I learned from his book was that there were a lot of the former slaves like him who were very enthusiastic about learning, and they were so motivated and so grateful to be able this opportunity to join the general culture. It wasn't something, Booker T wasn't accommodating in a sense that he himself was different or somehow passive in how he dealt with the circumstances of the day. The other thing it jumped out at me that was just fascinating, in some of these schools he was in there, if I remember right, with Native Americans, with First Nation folks, and many of them, listen to this, many of them were slave owners. Many of the people in the class with him, the Indians, or the Native Americans, had been slave owners, and they disdained the African Americans for. Do you remember this part? Where they disdained them for becoming slaves as opposed to dying resisting. You remember this?
Right.
That this was the Native American view of Black America, was the fact that you allowed yourself to be captured, or somebody from your family or whatever, and you didn't die, that therefore we sit in judgment of you. And they were slave owners, which I didn't realize Native Americans had been slave owners.
Yeah, almost everybody. Do you know, in Columbus, I was starting to research Columbus because he was so controversial all of a sudden. So do you know when he landed in the Bahamas and Haiti, we now know as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, do you know that some of those tribes were enslaving other tribes? Because Dr. Drew, as we learned, is because you conquer back then, and then you control. I mean, it's in the Bible. All of a sudden, they act like we invented it. The 1619 Project. Everybody was free until America decided this experiment with slavery. It's just so wrong to put people in our times. But to your point, he also mentioned, too, when he would go to Washington, he would think it would be trouble getting a hotel. But Indians had at least a lot less problems with a hotel than blacks getting a hotel. When he went up there, he always found that was interesting, because he was mentoring people, trying to give them an idea of what an education could bring and the power you could achieve. And yet they were treated better in Washington than maybe the most famous black men. And I'll bring you to another story that I think is interesting. And that is when you talk about accommodating, he said, in some of his other books, that really, I just want to get in depth in research rather than really help me in this book. But he would say, think about African Americans as the white men went to fight in a civil war. They could have easily overtaken that plantation, killed all the women, or just taken over and owned everything. They showed their loyalty to the country, to the cause, and to their slave master. So they thought, and they fought in every, he points out, they fought in every single war, including the revolution. And he just said, if you want to know loyalty, that's loyalty. They were able to trust, the white people were able to trust blacks with their families as they went to war and with their healing when they came back. And I'll bring you somewhere else. When it was time to come back and to for the South to be free, the white people were lost. And this is what Ron DeSantis was referring to 2 months ago. They had no skills. Black people did everything because they were slaves. They had the skills. They could do the construction. They could build the fences. They could take care of the fields. They took care of the crops. These guys couldn't fix the doorway. They couldn't hang a door. They couldn't paint. They weren't painting the house. So a lot of them stayed on and maybe took a minimal pay for housing because they almost felt bad for the white people who were their slave masters because they knew nothing. And that's what made me think of Michael Rowe too, is that we as a country, we've stopped being able to build anything anymore. And as a nation, we can learn from that. That's what DeSantis was saying. He wasn't saying slavery was good. He was saying when slavery ended, a lot of African Americans had skills like handymen, construction, agriculturists, sheet metal workers, whatever. Not saying that slavery was good. And that was his point, which he didn't expand on.
Yeah, the psychology is a little complicated though. This psychology of having been enslaved and sort of not knowing how it's, it reminds me of what happened when, if you remember in Schindler's List, when the concentration camps were freed, they just sat there in the camp. Now what? Now we don't know how to. We don't have. It's a psychology. Yes, a psychology gets going, and so. On one hand, it's like, yes, that Black America should be very proud of what they did and the contributions. But the idea that it was just out of duty is like, there's a lot more going on at the time. And by the way, and then you walked out into the world, into that Jim Crow era. It's like, oh boy, it's really interesting to me that we really have to come to terms with so much of this, and it's not a simple thing, right? And I always felt like that's what you were trying to help us do. To me, you and I had this conversation before. Frederick Douglass, his words can lead us out of this. I don't know, and that Booker T not so much, but I know you did this other book on Frederick Douglass and Lincoln. Frederick Douglass's speeches, I swear to God, you said Booker T was one of the greatest Americans. I think Frederick Douglass may be the greatest American. His words could get us forward.
True. Booker T. Washington looked up to Frederick Douglass, and he came and spoke at Tuskegee too. And there's no doubt about it. He was inspiration. He was the Marco Polo of explorers of race relations. And he was a little like Muhammad Ali, challenging you, and a little like Barkley, challenging. He had a sense of humor, but he had a determination to change things. And both men could have lived great lives in Europe, and they came back to make our country better. And he was before Lincoln came along, Douglas has almost given up on the country. He said, "Wait, if this Republican."
He was touring England. He was making a living touring England and Ireland. He was a giant celebrity over there.
He was also a fugitive. And white people paid for his freedom to make sure he wouldn't be arrested when he got back, while being a best-selling author, because his biography was like, wow, is this what life as a slave is like? Is this real? And they go, of course it's real. There he is. He takes his shirt off and there'd be whip marks on his back. So, and then he keep on improving on that. So we need that. But see, the thing is, Dr. Drew, I don't hate the country or like it less because this happened. I think it's so realistic, and it's so important to understand how far we've come. How many people have sacrificed and grown throughout it. That makes the sacrifice. Look at these other people for inspiration and for clarification on why we're the country we are today. It's not because we're perfect. It's because we try to be. And also an important point to note that we were en route to a much faster recovery until the Compromise of 1876, when we got a, believe it or not, electoral college breakdown again. Right after the Civil War, they could not decide who won 5 separate states. Samuel Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes. And they were about to come to the point where another constitutional crisis, where they cut a deal. And they said, well, let the Republican, let Hayes become president. But I want you to pull the Union troops out of the South. And Hayes says, I'll deal with it. I'll say yes to that. But you got to promise not to go back to where you were. And they broke their promise to a degree with Jim Crow.
No, and that was,
And that's why I've always said that John Wilkes Booth did more damage to this country than Bin Laden and all these other guys. And here's why. You put Lincoln with President Grant and General Grant, and you combine him with Frederick Douglass and other greats in the Senate. We might, if they survived the 1860s, we might not have needed the 1960s.
Yeah, this is what I've always said, that the so-called Reconstruction period, which is what you're talking about, was so horrific. When you read about it, the violence, the horrible racism was so horrible that I almost feel like it was such a profound trauma that we put it behind us and don't want to think about it, because when you read about it, it's just an unbelievable period of history. I think I first got sort of really into it reading the Grant biography and then reading the Douglass biography and then getting deeper into what was going on there. You know, we have all these people still are traumatized by the idea of, say, lynching, right? Lynching was not something that really happened during the slavery era, because if you lynched a slave, the slave owner would kill you for destroying something that was his. And lynching came in this Reconstruction era, and Frederick Douglass said it himself. He said, "We've given up the lash for the shotgun," and that was truer words never spoken. It was so violent and so awful. And you're right, that compromise unleashed it. It became, there were actually massacres as a result of that.
So the question is since I think everything that we just said is indisputable. We didn't soft pedal anything, right? We also know that people grew up and have certain beliefs. So they grow up and they believe certain things, and they're in a certain era. We look back at those eras, and the most obvious one is same-sex marriage. If I told you in 2008 that the guy would be president of the United States named Barack Obama said that marriage is between a man and a woman, in 2012, if you said that, you would look as someone who was anti-gay or was unenlightened. Barack Obama in 2008, if you're gay, don't hate him. Notice how the country evolved in 2012. And we understand more. Don't hate previous eras. Understand they're going to look back at 2024, not this show, and say, can you believe these guys? Can you believe what they said? But looking back at history, you go back and the question is, what do you do about it? Do you say, like Gavin Newsom said, let's study reparations to pay people because of the color of their skin, for sacrifices they didn't have to make, for suffering they didn't go through because of what society was like at that previous time, which you might not even have relatives who are in this country, and your family might be blended in a different way. It's impossible to go back and make amends to something that happened almost 100 years ago in some cases. But notice, if there's an inequity, there's a school like Woodrow Wilson was so happy, evidently, that he was at Princeton and didn't allow one black in there. He was so happy. And that's the Democratic president of the United States that replaced Taft after that big controversy when Roosevelt came back. Okay, most of these guys are all Democrats, by the way. That's also important to point out. So if you're gonna be bitter, don't be bitter at Lincoln. He was Republican. You could be upset in the 1960s, but like when Nikki Haley made that mistake, and it was a mistake, was asked about the Civil War. And she said, well, the cause of that was states' rights and liberty. What are you talking about? It was fundamentally slavery. It became a bigger story even through it all, free states and slave states. We know this. How she blew that, I don't know. But for the most part, we're a country that's evolved to the point where we may have overcompensated for inequities for minorities, and is creating perhaps a resentment from people who don't feel a bias. Dr. Drew, you did not ask me the first time he came on the show. I'm going to go on the Brian Kilmeade Show. I don't know him. Is he white or black? I don't know if
Right.
I should read this book. Was the author white or black? Maybe they said that 150 years ago, but they don't say it now. And there are people out there that have these horrible views of Hispanics and women in the workplace and whatever it is. You can't legislate that. You can't pay people because the previous generation was biased. I think we have to understand that we're the most successful multicultural country in the history of the world, have an awareness of our past, ways to improve, but we can't do this big apology thing with the 1619 Project that looks to vilify a nation that almost everybody else in the world would rather live in than the one they are in.
Well, Brian, hang on here. We got to take a quick break. Again, I suggest you go get both of his books. This is Booker T, Teddy and Booker T. There it is. And the Caleb, if you can get the Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass book up there too. What was that called again, Brian? I forget the name.
The President Freedom Fighter. And Freedom
President
Fighter.
Freedom Fighter. So these are great ways to study history. Brian has done a lot of work sort of collating things and bringing things together. These are complicated periods of history with a lot going on, and he does you a favor by bringing it together and bringing it under. There it is, the President of the Freedom Fighter. Bringing it under, you see a theme, right? You're going to get that. You're going to learn about the relationship between these two and the complexities there. We will talk when we get back. Maybe we'll keep going with that topic, Lincoln and what Frederick Douglass called his white supremacy. We'll analyze that and be back right after this. Are you one of the millions of American women and men dealing with premature hair thinning and hair loss? Or maybe you're scared about inheriting that thinning look because it runs in your family? Start 2024 with a real solution that delivers results without the harsh side effects or unwanted chemicals and no need for prescription. Provia uses a safe natural ingredient, Procapil, to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and hair loss. Susan has been using Provia for months and she loves it.
I'm so happy because Provia is helping me grow longer, stronger, and shinier hair, especially up on top.
In fact, Provia was created by the founder of Genucel, the makers of our favorite skincare products, so it is no surprise that she has seen amazing results. Right now, new customers save over 50% plus free shipping. Every introductory package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, plus the Provia Super Concentrate for faster, more noticeable results. Don't wait. Order now to save an extra 10% and get free shipping at proviahair.com/Drew. That's PROVIAHAIR, proviahair.com/DREW. If you're trying to figure out the right present for someone, you will not go wrong with gifting the most comfortable sheets, clothing, and accessories that your friends and family have ever felt. Of course, I'm talking about Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth has the softest and most comfortable sheets, blankets, towels, PJs, joggers, and more guaranteed. Susan and I love them. In fact, we still have Cozy Earth sheets on our bed. I slept in them last night. I was thinking of how great they were. And look at this. I'm wearing one of their super comfortable t-shirts right now. I just can't get enough of Cozy Earth. Their sheets are durable, machine washable, and come with a 10-year warranty against defects. So no surprise that Cozy Earth's brand has been featured on Oprah's Favorite Things for 5 years in a row. Whether it's their luxury pajamas, super soft bedding, loungewear, or plush bath towels, you will love shopping and gift giving at Cozy Earth. Here's my gift to you this holiday season. Go to CozyEarth.com, enter code DREW to save 40%. That's CozyEarth.com with code DREW. CozyEarth.com, code DREW, save 40%. I think everyone knows the next medical crisis could be just around the corner, whether it comes in the form of another pandemic or something much more routine like a tick bite. You and your family need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You know the Wellness Company. We have their physicians on like Dr. McCullough frequently. The Wellness Company and their doctors are medical professionals you can trust. And their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy.
It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy
absolutely.
that you hope you're not going to
100%.
need, but if you need it, you sure as heck are going to wish you had it if you need it.
Be ready for anything. This medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin, Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. From anthrax to tick bites to COVID-19, the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is exactly what you need to have on hand to be prepared. Rest assured, knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to help you and your family stay safe from whatever life throws at you next. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is DRDREW.com/TWC to get 10% off today. Just click on that link. And we are back. We are visited by Brian Kilmeade. You know him from Fox and Friends. And Brian, one of the things that jumped out at me about Frederick Douglass was I must have been reading his biography. And in the opening chapter, the author chose to talk about the day that there was the consecration of the Emancipation Proclamation of the Emancipation Act, and there's a statue in the Washington Mall that was dedicated that day. And they asked Frederick Douglass to speak, and he said, I will speak. You may not like what I have to say. And they said, well, Lincoln was your friend. Yes, he was my friend, and he was a great man, but I'm going to have to speak my mind. And they go, oh, we want to hear from you. And he got up and he said, this man was a great man. This was an extremely important day. We have learned that there's much more to be done. But make no mistake, President Lincoln was a white supremacist. And I was clutching my pearls. I was, what? My Abraham Lincoln? I know he was a racist to start with, and he seemed to have gotten over his racism across his presidency or improved it. And I, through reading more and more and more of Frederick Douglass's speeches, I came absolutely to understand I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know what it was. That's how blinded I was. And the scales fell from my eyes because of his words. That there is this sense of Eurocentrism, Euro superiority that was infecting, certainly at that point of the time, and you see it in Teddy Roosevelt, so it persisted for quite some time. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
A couple of things. He went on to say, if I remember the speech correctly, because I took an excerpt from it, and one of the things he said that I do these shows on stage, where I talk about all these books in a conversational way, take questions. And I just thought it was necessary to take on the war in history and actually fight it with facts. When I'm on stage, every show is a little bit different, and it's kind of fun, motivational, inspirational, patriotic. And I bring up Frederick Douglass, and he was so impatient with Lincoln. He's like, when the war started, he's like, free the slaves. And Lincoln said, no, I'm not going to free him. He knew America at that time was not ready to fight to free the black man. But a year or two in, when things started evening out and the South started gaining some traction, and they started realizing that that's going to be the best way to victory. And he goes and finally meets Lincoln. He realizes, he says it. He said, if Lincoln listened to me, he goes, I looked at him as impatient, plotting, and basically laconic about his approach to black rights. But in his eyes, he was actually going at the exact right pace for the country in which he leads. That was his responsibility. Not the country he wanted, but the country he had to lead. Next thing you know, African Americans are fighting in the war. He's recruiting African Americans for Lincoln. They're working together, and they're talking about causing an insurrection, John Brown style, in the South, letting the slaves know, go ahead, rise up against your masters. We got your back, because if you find your freedom, the country's going to be, when we win this war, you're going to be free. So what he was trying to say is he was president for the white man. And he said, little by little, he realized that didn't make him a bad person. He was a person of his times. But the people kind of knew, in my humble opinion, too, that he knew he was going to speak like that, because Grant was the president 10 years after the dedicating the statue, which was so controversial during the George Floyd riots. And I went back to that, did a stand-up on it. We did a whole feature on it. And he goes back to it, and they kind of knew that he was going to let America have it. And Grant was okay with that. Mm-hmm.
Because they looked to him for truth. They wanted him to help us see the truth. And my goodness, the man he was the greatest orator of this country's history, I think, in terms of the combination of brilliance and persuasive power. But back to Lincoln and his choices, he was a profound pragmatist. He was almost like autistic in his pragmatism. And had he freed the slaves early, he would have lost Kentucky. And if he lost Kentucky, he might have lost the war, and then there would have been no freedom for the slaves. And
Maryland.
And Maryland, that's right. And on top of that, he did not have freeing the slaves as the priority. His priority was keeping the Union in its proper alignment. That was his priority, and it was a legal mind. That's the way he thought about things. What's that?
And this is how right you are, because this would drove Frederick Douglass nuts. And how do we know that? He had a newspaper, and he wrote about it. And he said, "Look, he knew Lincoln basically reached out in the middle of the war and said, listen, you put down your guns, you can keep your slaves. We'll talk about this. We can just get the country back together, lace the country back together." And Frederick Douglass says, "Are you kidding? You hadn't met him yet. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
All of this bloodshed, all of this struggle, all the abolitionist movement, the John Brown, the intrusion,
Massacre.
it's all part of the massacre. Yeah, that did happen. And he ended up getting killed and hanged." He goes, "You would actually give that up?" He goes, "Yeah, because what's his objective? Getting the Union back together, working us through the other element of it." That's why he went up to Sam Houston from another book. Sam Houston says, "I don't want to fight this war." He's the president of Texas, and he became governor of Texas. And they said, "Okay, if you don't want to fight the war, then you might as well quit as governor." Lincoln reached out to him and said, "Listen, if you just stay out of the war, I'll provide you protection. You could do whatever you want with the slaves. I got to keep this country together. It'd be a lot easier if Texas was not fighting in the South." And Sam Houston said, "Listen, I lost this. I'm the only one who feels this way." But here's something you'd appreciate. This is why I love Douglass and I love Booker T. Washington, because time and time again, I found myself getting life lessons from him and less race lessons from him. This is when Booker T. Washington asked him, "Listen, what did you do when you're Frederick Douglass and they told you to get in a different car and you refused to leave and then you got picked up and dragged to another car?" He said this to Douglass. Douglass said this to him. He goes, "They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. The soul is within me as no man can degrade. I am not the one that is being degraded on account of this treatment, but it's those who are inflicting it upon me." And that's Booker T. Washington. You can't get me to hate you. You're just not worth enough to me. It takes too much energy. If you don't like me, I'm going to move on, but I will not hate you. And I think we could all learn from that.
It's interesting. Epictetus, maybe the first Stoic philosophers, or one of the first, had a similar. He was a slave also, and Epictetus just means sort of object or owned object. It's something that somebody owns, and he had the very similar sort of orientation to the people that beat him and enslaved him. It's very interesting. Now, I want to go back to the Southern insurrection, and it occurred to me that it is sort of has echoes in the present moment. Do you think we're going to learn through the courts a definition of insurrection? Because Lincoln had he had a very specific definition in his head. And he did not believe, for instance, that secession was a possibility. When you have a contract amongst equals, the Union, and one member of that contract steps out, that's not secession. That's out of your normal alignment in insurrection. Do you think we're going to get a court sort of definition coming forward because of all the January 6th stuff?
I would love to get one because that was one day, as bad as it is. And I don't think there's an answer to that was the plan. The plan was to take over the House and then force Trump to stay in power. I don't think that the same people that said Trump and Russia, Vladimir Putin plotted together to slay Hillary Clinton, you can't also say that and call him a moron. You can also say that, that Trump was out there fighting because he thought he was wrong. But if there were so many people that were just walking through the Capitol and others were doing what they were doing in the Capitol, which was some badass things, and I do not support it, being any Trump supporter that truly believed what Trump believed would never attack a cop. What I was seeing attacking law enforcement that day, and I don't know if you know this, Dr. Drew, but my text messages to Mark Meadows became public knowledge. It was read by Liz Cheney. And I was saying to Meadows, what are you doing? He's got to get out in front of the camera. Do you understand how bad this is? Who are these people? And also Eric wrote me back and said, Brian, there's no way these are our people. You know our people. You've been to our events. No one attacks law enforcement and acts this way. And we do know that most of the Trump people got beat up during that. I don't want to get into politics, but we will get a definition. But why is it that Jack Smith, with everything that he aggressively is charging, and that's what he's known for, I think he's overcharged this whole case in every aspect, and we'll see shortly. Why would he not say, insurrection? I got enough here to say insurrection. He hasn't said that. So I think we'll get a definition. But insurrection is.
Okay. So two things. Yes, Andrew Jackson was the first legal mind to put his head to the notion of secession, because he had a secession crisis as well. And he was very clear. He was the first one to use the logic that Abraham Lincoln later used, which was there is no such thing as secession. You're talking nonsense when you say secession. And then on the other hand, Jack Smith, is that his name? Again, the politics of the day are sort of
Jack Smith,
escaped me many times. Yeah.
He's the prosecutor on.
Yeah. I get the sense that they're holding back a little bit because of exactly this reason, that they don't want it to go to a higher court and get a definition that doesn't fit what happened on January 6th. I have a feeling that that's some of it, and somebody's going to overstep, and we're going to get that definition, and we should have that definition. We should understand what that was. What is this now, Brian Kilmeade? Oh, these are your tweets or your texts.
That's what I wrote to Mark Meadows. Can you see that? Yep.
Yeah.
He says, please get him on TV. He's destroying everything you have accomplished. So, that Mark Meadows
Brian,
came up as far. Yeah.
Brian, I one of the reasons you and I like talking to each other is I feel we have a similar, let's call it affection / fascination with our country and its history, right? I mean, that's what you and I like talking about together all the time. And
yep.
I lately, and I'm going to ask you to sort of explain this to me, and I brought this up almost every day lately. I become completely preoccupied with early 20th century Russia a little bit, and very preoccupied with 1789 France. And I'm just seeing so many echoes of at least the psychology of our present moment in what the thinking was and the behavior was and the personality constructs were around the early days of the French Revolution. And so I'm going to ask you, why do you think I'm preoccupied about that? And I have noticed something, because I've been doing it for a few months now, I've been digging in deep, that the French are re-embracing their history. There used to be a lot of really negative feelings about particularly Napoleon, and they now call it the Black Myth or something, the Mythique Noire, if I remember right. And they're saying, no, that was created by the British to disdain this man. And in fact, when he died, when he was measured on his deathbed, he was exactly average for a Frenchman of the day. He wasn't even short. He was not a short person. He was an average height man, and they sort of vilify between the English and the French disdain and the French confusion about their and sort of disdain for their own heritage, and they are going back and re-embracing it and saying, "Oh no, we are sick of this. We are embracing our heritage. We have a great history, a great culture, a great language, a great culinary history. We want it back. We want to own it. We want to re-entrench in it." I'm seeing that. I think. A, do you think that's true? And B, could we maybe benefit from some of that? And then C, is that why I'm so preoccupied with the French Revolution? Because I'm worried about the present moment and its impact?
You remind me, Andrew Roberts' book on Napoleon, I started, didn't finish, but I'm not an expert. I just know broad strokes on that era when they got rid of the czars and elites and royalty, and they just were tired of the two-tier justice system. They were tired of the two-tiered poverty and wealth and a chance for success. And I'm thinking about Oliver Anthony's song. And this guy comes out of nowhere, this guy who's apolitical, and just talks about how he can't get ahead. The dollar's worth nothing. And why the rich men in Richmond are deciding everything. And who are these people? Why are you focused on Epstein Island? And why are you not focused on other we got 80,000 unaccompanied minors who we have lost track of. We have all this other trafficking, and you're focused on Epstein Island. So he writes that song, which is a little bit simplistic way of tackling your issue. I think we're there. I hope it doesn't end up with the violence of the revolution. But I did read some fascinating things about Lafayette and James Monroe, who's an unsung hero of America's early days. And he, they were great friends. He was great friends with Jefferson. He was great friends with Washington. But Monroe came to see him during that time. And I'm sure you know this, Dr. Drew. And he basically was fighting for his life. He had lost everything. And Jefferson was able to help him out and get him some furniture and help him out with the embassy, the American embassy in France at that time, and maybe protect him and save him from a lynching. Lafayette, who meant so much to American history. So I did not know the French were re-embracing their past, but they need to. I mean, they lost a third of their country to illegal immigrants or immigration, ungoverned immigration, who really didn't want any part of France. They just wanted out of their country, which we're going to be experiencing shortly with the 7 million that Joe Biden let in. I'm not saying we don't have immigrants. There's a way to do it, and there's the way that he's doing it, which to me, that's impeachable more than anything else that we've witnessed, including what Bill Clinton did. But I hope we're not at that time where it ends up in violence, but a recalibration would be great. But what gets me is recalibrate, but don't run back from America's role in the world. America has a role in the world. It is more than just our shores. It just is not going to ever, no responsible leader would ever let Israel wither, our allies be destroyed by aggressive China and Russia, by Ukraine being eaten alive because they're not a perfect democracy. That's not what America has done since World War II. And that's really what's it's our best hope in the world. My hope is that a lot of these people who like J.D. Vance, who I like, and Josh Hawley, who I respect, who just want no part of America and Ukraine and helping out Israel, give them a check and don't worry about it. I think that's just the wrong attitude.
So when we left our last meeting together, you gave me a reading assignment. I'm thinking this time I might give you one. And it's a historical figure that you're no doubt familiar with, but I want you to take a real good look at Alexis de Tocqueville, both here and in France. I understand why you looked at Lafayette, but de Tocqueville, I think, was the real mover. He was the mover of ideas in France and here. He wrote Democracy in America, and it's still a classic. I may pick it up and read it again. But I didn't realize he had so much an effect on France as well. He was a major figure there.
I will. You got it. I'm going to work on it. I have a few more weeks talking about the book. I got a show on January 21st, and then I will turn the page in February. But I'm not looking around. I'm taking a break for a while, but that's why I want to read things that I want to read instead of researching to write.
Where is that public event? Where do you want people to go for that?
Joliet, Illinois, right outside Chicago. It's 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's selling well. VIP opportunities, and it's basically America great from the start. Never perfect, but always trying to be. And here's the ups and downs. I think that we got to win the war on history with facts and embrace our past, because we're coming up on year 250. I do remember being in grade school celebrating the bicentennial. The whole country was celebrating, even with 17% interest rates. I need to know that this country's going to be happy that we were born when we get to year 250. That's my goal.
Well, I think one of the things we have to be able to do is speak openly and realistically about slavery and Reconstruction and its repercussions through multiple generations and through history. We just have to really open the conversation up more completely. You brought up the international situation, and one of the things that I've discovered through interviewing people on this show is the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army has a cognitive defense system. They actually have a giant propaganda department that is pumping stuff into this country like crazy. And I have a feeling I think they're having their desired effect on us How do we, this is a completely different topic, and I'm going to sort of wrap up with this, but how do we get people to look at themselves if they are jumping on to these divisive winds that are blowing from Russia and China? They should be, it's disgusting that people from this country jump on to this propaganda that is being generated specifically to do what they're falling victim to. How do we get them to take a look at themselves, and how do we get people to resist doing so and become aware of this?
I'm so glad you asked me that, because if you want to unify the country, you have a common enemy. That's historically, that's what's always happened. There's a legitimate enemy in China. And you have Chuck Schumer, who believes it as much as I believe that Senator Marco Rubio to a degree. Most people should understand, whether they're buying land near our military bases or agricultural land to take over our food supply, they have the number one app in the world, TikTok, banned in a lot of European countries, using their news feeds to get America to think like they think. Not that China's great, but the subtle stories that make us look bad and them look good. And for example, the best example is this Hamas war with Israel. There's almost no positive Israel stories, no victimization, the reality of October 7th. Most of them talk about the martyrs that are of these warriors who are actually terrorists, and the Palestinian who were ousted from their homeland unjustly. But they don't do it directly, Dr. Drew. They don't just come out and say that. They do it through columns and news feeds. And most of all, let's get on with the counter-influencer. If you can't ban TikTok because you're too afraid of losing the young vote, well, go on there with your own algorithm. Let's get our influencers, our versions of Kardashians, and get on there. Number two, awareness. Yes. Help people in awareness. Hey, tell your son and daughter is 11 years old. Let me see your news feed. Did you read this? Yeah. Let me just tell you, this is not true. This is the real story. What about this? I see you clicked on this story. What about this? Instead of that conversation being, well, they don't want to talk to me, look at what they're reading and understand it. And a lot of those kids go, 11th graders come home and they seem to be pro-Hamas. Maybe you should educate them a little. Let's sit down. Are you a woman? Yes. Do you know what a woman does in that culture? Nothing. They can't have a job. They don't have equal rights. If you happen to be gay or trans, you can pick the building they want to throw you off of. That is not propaganda. That's the truth. Mm-hmm. That's who you're marching for. You want to cheer for the Houthi rebels? Let me tell you what they're about. They are supported by Iran. They're rocketing commercial vessels. They're the reason why everything that's going to cost double very shortly. And this is what they believe. They're Islamic extremists, only they prefer the Shia version of Islam as opposed to the Sunni version of Islam. Let me give you a sense of that culture. And if you still embrace that culture, Hamas is hiring. So are the Houthi rebels. I'm sure you can go over there with a great resume and they will embrace you. And nothing else I can be sure of. You will hate it. And you'll love our country a lot more. I would just say, these are the conversations you have with your kids. You don't have to say you're wrong and you're stupid. Just let them educate them on the facts. And when on the internet, you can immediately pull up the pictures. What size burqa do you want to take? Let me just explain to you what a woman is like in this Islamic extremist culture. Not putting down Muslims. I'm talking about extremists. And if you want to go to a traditional, non-terrorist Muslim culture, that's available too. But my sense is you have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah. Susan, you want to chime in here as I hear her talking and without a microphone on?
It's true.
Yeah, it is. Brian,
everybody knows how I feel about that.
What do you think your next project will be? What are you looking at next? You thought about that? I'm so curious where you go.
Intentionally, I'm not. Number one, Fox has their own book division now. So I would love to do things. They turned me down. HarperCollins turned me down for George Washington's Secret Six, Thomas Jefferson Tripoli Pirates. And after their Sentinel showed so much loyalty to me, I'm not going to stop now. I mean, we've had now 9 bestsellers, 7 with them. And this one's a bestseller for 4 weeks now. And I have nothing but great feelings for them. But I don't love doing things outside of Fox. I would love for them to get behind these projects rather than, you got a certain amount of times you can mention it and there's only a certain amount. I'd love to just stay on Fox, be able to talk about it. But I want to see what's next. And also, there's stuff that I just want to learn again. I always feel like I'm in the middle of having 4 tests due let alone studying for the shows. I'm not complaining. I'm just citing it.
It's a lot.
So I'm always talking. I
It's a
want to
lot.
see if I want to get creative again. I want to pull back and get creative and not get off the gas pedal in my ambition, but just open up my mind to what possibilities are. So that's my hope.
I have some ideas for you. I'd love to unleash you on a couple of things I've been thinking about for a while. But let me ask this last question. What did you learn anything new about Theodore Roosevelt? I'm sure you read the Theodore Rex and the Rise of Theodore Roosevelt and some of those classic, and there was another one with another reference to a king or something. King whatever. The point is that he is a very interesting guy. Did you learn anything new? Did you come up with anything on Teddy Roosevelt that was surprising? Yeah.
Everything. I'm just going to give you real quick. Just so know this. I know people on the premise of the book, they just said, Brian, what a reach. You got this rich kid, 5 generations of wealth going into the book. You got Booker T. Washington born a slave. What the hell are you talking about? At least Lincoln was born in abject poverty. And I say, good. To tell you, the reality is that Teddy Roosevelt in many quarters, and Tweed backed me up on this, so did other relatives, he was not supposed to survive childhood. They had no cure for asthma.
Right.
Believe it or not, it was brandy.
He had bad asthma.
Bad asthma. And they would sit there and watch this kid who was 80 pounds in would have been 11th grade with no formal schooling, with no friends. When he went out, he was bullied. So you could have a lot of money in life, but if you have enough, you have nothing. And then when he gets to Harvard, begins to find himself. And who would think by 20 years old he could write one of the most definitive, respected books on the War of 1812 from the naval perspective because his Confederate uncles helped him? I did not know that. He looked up to them, but he gave them such great history and gave us such a sense of what the vernacular was and the terminology was in the Navy. And also found out that he was determined to do something. As much as he worshiped his dad, he was determined to do something his dad didn't do. And that was fighting a war.
Right.
Dad's biggest regret was he didn't fight for the North.
Yes.
But I thought that was important too. And also it was important from the outsider perspective. Many people thought he was crazy. They thought that he was a wild card and a knucklehead.
He was a little crazy.
Mark Twain.
He definitely was a little crazy. Yeah. He definitely was a little hypomanic, but the dad was selling bonds or something behind Union lines or something. He did the best he could to try to help the Union cause in the camps, in the warfare, but really never fought because I forget what the reason was. And Teddy always resented. He felt bad about that, and boy, his work in the Spanish-American War was just like, what he did there was so wild. That was also pretty crazy. His first-hand accounts of people being cut down on all sides of him and just going, yeah, poor chap, anyway, I forged on. It's like, wasn't going to happen to me. It's like, that's a little bit of what we call narcissism, folks, and mania, too. So, but whatever, it worked. And that's, by the way, it's why I always discourage people from making too much of psychiatry or neurology when it comes to who should be in the White House, who should be in the Oval Office, because we've had some people with a lot of liabilities in there that have done some great things. Brian, I thank you so much for coming in and entertaining me. I hope it entertained everybody else as much as myself. I love having these conversations with you. And I'm going to call you one day and unload some of these ideas I've been fishing around with, try to convince you to do the research necessary to build these cases I've been thinking about.
And thank you, Dr. Drew, too, for coming on One Nation, too. You came on a couple of weeks ago. It was awesome. And this was the interview I was looking forward to most because I felt like you were there in the beginning. You were there in the beginning. And if you had said, Brian, here's the problem with that project, I probably would have stopped it. So that's why I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I know you had this great curiosity.
Yeah. I share it with you, my friend. Thanks, Brian Kilmeade, everybody. Thank you so much, sir.
Go get him, Dr. Drew.
And... Say, buddy. I'm looking around. I'm watching the streams. Anything, Susan, out there? Questions or concerns people have? Did I indulge myself in my...
Yeah, you were very focused.
I think that's a criticism.
We're still here.
I think that's a criticism, everybody. What were you saying, Caleb?
People are just very curious about the tiny door behind him. It's very thin and tall, and a lot of comments about the PVC pipe on the side. I'm like, guys, focus. focus. Focus, please.
That is, I think
I didn't
that's.
see that.
I'm looking at, I think that's a distortion of the camera, number one. And number two, in the East, you can have lots of weird panels and doors. He's in the East.
He's probably in a closet somewhere.
And maybe it's an homage to Alice in Wonderland or something. Maybe it's.
So, do we have any people on Twitter Spaces that want to chime in?
I am not yet a co-host there, Caleb.
No,
maybe we should look at that.
I don't know if there's going to be callers coming in today. It might be a glitch on there right now.
Okay.
Because there were some people with hands up and then
Really?
they disappeared. Yeah.
I was
don't know what's going
listening.
on.
I was listening on Twitter Spaces. It was working fine.
Well, listen, let's go back over the upcoming. We will take calls tomorrow. I promise.
Yeah, let's take everybody call in tomorrow.
That is what's coming up there.
Since the show's called Ask Dr. Drew, we should probably take calls occasionally.
Well, that'll be. I have a new slogan for 2024. We can do better. We can do better than 2023, that's for sure. But we can do better this year. So we can do better is something I'm going to sort of hang my hat on. And to that end, I will try to take more calls.
Your daddy on Rumble said he was the only white kid in a black school.
And did he have any insights as a result? Does he have something he wants to share with us?
He says history rocks.
Okay, I agree with that. But let's keep that. So Paul Alexander, he's the guy that was in the White House with the NIH when they decided on the 6 feet social distancing. We'll get into that. Peter McCullough, you all of course know. He's been on the warpath lately. I'm trying to get the Florida Surgeon General back, who just today, Dr. Latipo, announced that he would like the discontinuation of all mRNA vaccines, which he's not saying all COVID vaccines, which is interesting because the Covaxin vaccine is a better vaccine and it's still available. Roseanne on January 10th, James Corbett to talk about Gelman amnesia on January 9th, and tomorrow, Dr. Sean Baker, talk little carnivore, and then we will take calls. So we appreciate you all being here.
So I have a question on Rumble.
Yes, go right ahead.
From Wind Chimes. Dr. Drew, what does it mean if words take a long time to process? Which kind of doctor do I seek out?
Depends the age of the individual. Can that person give us their age? If you're older, there are more significant medical concerns when you are older. When you are younger, it's more in the order of typically things like ADD, ADHD, but there can be a lot of other strange and unusual. So I would start with a neurologist. 50-year-old. I would start with a neurologist.
We have a little lag, so we have to wait for that.
There can be a lot of neurological and medical problems that can affect processing and working memory and word recall and a lot of those things for sure. And if that's a new symptom, then by all means, you want to see a neurologist. So anything else? I like this.
Your daddy, I like that one. Divide and conquer. It's an old trick. We must unite.
Okay.
Like the place we live in, the United States of America.
I will tell you what, just get everyone re-entrenched in your history and then stop being victimized by the propagandists that are largely coming from outside of this country. Stop it. You should be if you have fallen victim, you should look at yourself and you should be disgusted. Disgust is an important feeling. It will pull you away from doing that again. You should be not necessarily ashamed because these guys are good at what they do, but disgusted that you got pulled into it.
And then also Rick from YouTube said, tell me about Covaxin in 10 years once there is time to do long-term study safety trials. Dr. Drew?
Well, I would say this, because Covaxin is a whole viral platform, we have literally thousands of patient years with whole virus, and it is perfectly fine, perfectly safe. Now, whether or not giving that kind of virus to a 3 months old or a 6 month old is a different question than giving it to an adult. But we have lots of whole virus vaccination in adults, and they are quite safe. And it has better immunity and wider immunity. The question I've been asking lately is, why did they direct the mRNA vaccine at the pathogenic piece of the virus, which is the spike protein? And why are they surprised when your body produces a lot of that spike protein, you get some side effects? Because that's the pathogenic protein. The Covaxin has some of that, but also has the nuclear capsid and the rest of the virus. So your immune system will respond to all of it and build a response. So if it sees any part of that virus next time, it will respond effectively. So we had to get Dr. Gandhi back in here. Barsh, we had to get Monica Gandhi back in here because she's the one that's been pushing the Covaxin for a couple of years. I would like to hear her thoughts on why that perhaps has been delayed or why we aren't having any luck and why the massive push on the mRNA vaccines, particularly in populations that have no risk from the illness. So Monica Gandhi, look at her Twitter thread if you want to see some of the stuff she's put out. What else you got there, Susan?
Anthony Brown is here. Hi, Anthony. Dr. Drew, how come I cannot keep my hair? It's disappearing.
Anthony wants to ask that?
Yeah.
You have to, if you can stop time, you can stop your hair
Maybe
loss,
use the Provia. Can
Provia is good.
Provia?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a new sponsor called
Provia's
Provia, Anthony Brown, and it seems to be helping my hair. So I've been using it for 6 months.
There you go. And there's a money back guarantee on that one. I believe. So go do it. You got nothing to lose.
Yeah, or Rogaine. But I used Rogaine before, but now I'm using the Provia, and it's kind of nice. It makes your hair kind of shiny.
Yeah, people don't like what the Rogaine does to the scalp.
It coats your hair. It makes it stronger, and
Provia does.
Yeah, a little poofier.
All right. Well, there's the.
I love it.
There's the link right there. proviahair.com/Drew.
Yeah, check it out.
Listening. And are you getting
a discount if you go to that link?
Are you getting all this off the Restream or where?
Yeah, Restream.
I'm watching the Restream. I'm not seeing these questions. Please tell Drew that Dr. something doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Dr. F-Head?
Yeah. I am, Janice, I understand that there has been some adulteration of Dr. Fauci's behavior. What I cling to, I must tell you, is not just the hope that he will return to the mean, because as I've said before, he was a hero of mine most of my career, but that he is being evasive for a reason that is for our own good, which I hate those kinds of ideas, and it better sure as hell be for our own good and not just that we can't handle the truth. But I don't know. We're going to leave it. He's going to be testifying in front of the House. We've got
poor guy.
We got Rand Paul. Rand Paul has been gearing up for this for months. I'm sure it'll be a very interesting interview. He's got a book called Deception, if you want to read about this, where he chronicles his concerns from top to bottom, and it's pretty compelling. All right, so we will leave. What a
crazy life that man has.
We will leave it at that. We thank you all for being here. We will be back tomorrow at 3:00 with Dr. Baker and your calls. See you then.
Ta-ta.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help. My understanding is, when you look at the data, is that a lot of women will not even contemplate a guy like under 5'10". So you're apparently statistically
I know.
That's true. So you're ruling out a whole bunch of guys that might be.
So then they have to be funny. Like your personality has to make up for that height.
It could be great.
Yeah.
But
like
you're
Mark
not
Normand.
But I love the way you're just shitting on Mark Normand.
I love Mark Normand, but he's short.
Yes.
And he even said that about himself. He was like talking about shit on himself, how short he was, but he's fucking hilarious.
Hilarious.